kuonyesha venye tulipanga mili hapa kwa gari ikatoshana aje.
Sinu
hivyo ndo ungeuliza. Si nimekwambia mili iliingia tukakunja mili namna hiyo. Wewe unataka kuniambia ati ni compare alikuwa anatoshana aje? Hiyo ni maswali gani niuliza?
On October 25th, 2019, Joyce Syombua and her 2 children left Nairobi and traveled to Nanyuki. A mother, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 5-year-old son. They were heading to Laikipia Airbase to visit Major Peter Mwaura Mugure, a Kenya Defence Forces officer and the father of the 2 children. For Joyce, this was supposed to be a normal family visit, a chance for her children to spend time with their father, a chance for the family to reconnect. Schools had closed that day for nearly 3 months, giving Shanice, Maua and Prince Michael an opportunity to spend more time away from their daily routine. Nobody knew that this journey would become the final trip of their lives. Nobody knew that the visit to Nanyuki would end with a nationwide search, a shocking discovery, and one of Kenya's most disturbing murder cases. The 3 would never return to their home in Kayole, Nairobi. Their disappearance would expose a tragic story involving a decorated military officer, a complicated relationship, a court battle over children, and allegations of a carefully planned murder. Investigators would later believe that what appeared to be a family reunion was actually a carefully organized trap. This is the story of Joyce Syombua, Shanice, Maua, and Prince Michael, the family whose lives ended after a visit to Laikipia Airbase. Joyce Syombua was a 31-year-old mother living in Kayole, Nairobi. She was raising 2 children, Shanice, Maua, and Prince Michael. To those who knew her, Joyce was a mother deeply committed to her children. Her life revolved around taking care of them and ensuring they had a future. Shanice Maua was 10 years old. She was at an age where she was beginning to discover the world around her, build friendships, and develop her own personality. Her younger brother, Prince Michael, was only 5 years old. At that age, he was still dependent on the adults around him for protection, guidance, and love. For both children, Major Peter Mwaura Mugure was their father. But their relationship with him had not always been simple. The connection between Joyce and Mugure had been complicated. It was a relationship that had experienced periods of separation and reconciliation. Family members and friends knew that the 2 had an on and off relationship. Joyce lived in Nairobi with the children. Mugure lived and worked hundreds of kilometers away in Nanyuki. He was stationed at Laikipia Airbase, where he served as a Kenya Defence Forces officer. Major Peter Mwaura Mugure was not an ordinary suspect. Before the accusations against him emerged, he was known as a military officer who had built a respected career. He had participated in international missions, including United Nations-backed operations, and had received commendations for his service. Inside the military, he held a position of authority. But his personal life was much more complicated. The relationship between Mugure and Joyce had already reached the courtroom before the events of 2019. The issue involved the 2 children. For years, questions existed about Mugure's responsibility as their father. Eventually, DNA testing confirmed that he was the biological father of Shanice and Prince. That confirmation would lead to a court battle over financial support and parental responsibilities. Just 2 months before Joyce and her children traveled to Nanyuki, a major legal decision had been made. The Milimani High Court ordered Major Mugure to provide financial support for the children after DNA tests confirmed his paternity. On August 9, 2019, the court ordered Mugure to pay Joyce 25,000 shillings every month for the children's upkeep. The order also included responsibilities relating to rent and school fees. Joyce was granted custody of Shanice and Prince. Mugure was allowed visitation rights. The ruling legally confirmed his role as the children's father. But according to investigators, this court history later became an important part of understanding the relationship between Joyce and Mugure. Detectives examining the disappearance wanted to understand whether tensions from the past could have played any role in what happened. On Friday, October 25, 2019, Joyce and her children began their journey from Nairobi to Nanyuki. The schools had closed that day. The children had almost 3 months away from classes. For many families, this period would have been a chance to rest, travel, and spend time together. For Joyce, it was an opportunity for her children to be with their father. According to Major Mugure's statement to police, the visit had 2 main purposes. The first was to celebrate Shanice's upcoming birthday. The second was to try and repair his relationship with Joyce. He claimed they were attempting reconciliation. From Joyce's perspective, the visit appeared to be about family, a mother taking her children to spend time with their father, a weekend away from Nairobi, a chance for the children to strengthen their bond with him. But investigators would later develop a completely different theory. They believed the visit had been planned as part of a scheme to kill Joyce and her children. Joyce, Shanice, and Prince arrived safely in Nanyuki on October 25, 2019. They entered Laikipia Airbase and checked into house number A3. This was Major Mugure's official military residence inside the base. The family spent the night there. During the evening, Joyce remained in communication with a friend in Nairobi. Those conversations would later become some of the final confirmed moments of her life. Nothing publicly suggested that anything was wrong. A mother and her children were visiting their father. Inside the military installation, life continued normally. But the following morning would become the turning point.
We are safe. We're spending the night at his workplace. The security is very good.
Okay, happy to hear that, dear. Do you think you'll be intimate?
We can't. We're sharing a bed with the kids. There is only one.
On October 26, 2019, Joyce and the children had breakfast together. It appeared to be another normal morning. According to detectives, Joyce later went to take a shower at around 9 a.m. When she returned, investigators said Mugure had already left with the children. The children were gone. At around 11 a.m., Mugure returned. According to detectives, he claimed that he had left the children at a friend's house because he wanted to have a private conversation with Joyce. But the hours continued passing. The children did not return. By 3 p.m., Shanice and Prince were still missing. Concerned about their safety, Joyce contacted a friend in Nairobi. She expressed worry about where her children were. That communication would become the last known message from Joyce. After that, there was silence.
Around 6:20 something, almost 6:30, akanipigia reverse call. Ati sasa poa, akaniambia niko na wasiwasi, nikamuuliza ni nini tena. Ati niliogopa asubuhi kukuambia sababu nilijua utanipigia kelele. Venye Peter alitoka na watoi asubuhi, hakurudi na wao. Nikamuuliza, na ukimuuliza watoto wako wapi, alikuambia aje? Aliniambia alipeleka watoto wako tu sawa. Hakumwambia mahali alipeleka watoto wako tu sawa. amewapeleka mahali wa spend huko, na sisi tukae pamoja, at least tuone kama tunaweza sort out issues zetu, tuache kukaa na hii mfurugano mingi. Simu yangu ikaisha credit, nikamwambia simu yangu imeisha credit. Nikamtext, kukaa nikamtext, wameletwa, text ikaingia, haikujibiwa. Niambia mama Shanice wametoka. Nikamuuliza wametoka wameenda wapi? Wamerudi Nairobi. Hiyo ni around 8. Wamerudi Nairobi. Nikamuuliza sasa usiku mpango imefika wapi ya kuwa wanarudi sasa usiku kukuja Nairobi? Na hiyo haikuwa kulingana na vile nilikuwa nimeongea na mama Shanice. Akaniambia kuna vitu zimetokea kwa kambi, hawangeweza kuspend night hapa.
The following day, October 27th, 2019, Joyce Syombua and her 2 children were reported missing. A missing persons report was filed at Soweto Police Station under Occurrence Book number 25/27/10/2019. Investigations began immediately. At first, detectives were searching for 3 missing people, a mother and her 2 children. But as investigators started collecting information, the case began changing. They began looking deeper into the relationship between Joyce and Mugure. They spoke to family members. They spoke to friends. They examined the previous court case involving child support. Slowly, investigators began developing a theory that Joyce and her children may not have disappeared voluntarily.
Na siku Peter alijaribu kupiga simu akiongea na Michael, akamwambia baba, unataka nikupatie nini? Unataka nikubaie nini? Akamuuliza, unanijua? Si wewe ni yule Peter alikuwa anataka kutuua. Mtoto tu alimwambia hivyo. Siwezi taka kusikia jina ya Peter mimi, na nikatoto tu kadogo.
As detectives began investigating the disappearance, Major Peter Mwaura Mugure gave police his account of what he claimed had happened. According to his statement, the visit by Joyce and the children had been planned for a positive reason. He said the purpose was to celebrate Shanice's upcoming birthday and to try to rebuild his relationship with Joyce. Mugure told investigators that the family spent the night of October 25th at his residence inside Laikipia Airbase. He claimed that the following morning, October 26th, he left with Shanice and Prince. According to his account, he took the children to the Nanyuki Metatu stage. He claimed he handed them over to a woman he described as Joyce's friend, who had traveled from Timau in Meru County to collect them. Mugure said he then returned to Laikipia Airbase to deal with personal issues involving Joyce. He claimed that later that day, he and Joyce went to Kirimara Springs Hotel in Nanyuki town for a late lunch. According to Mugure, while they were at the hotel, he received an urgent duty call from Laikipia Airbase. He said the call forced him to leave. He claimed he later dropped Joyce at the Nanyuki Matatu stage at around 6 p.m. before returning to his duties. However, investigators would later question parts of this explanation. They began trying to confirm whether the events described by Mugure actually happened. Detectives began retracing the final known movements of Joyce and her children. They wanted to establish where the family had gone after arriving at Laikipia Airbase. They searched for witnesses, they examined records, they looked at communication between people connected to the case. Police sought passenger records from 4 NTE Sacco and information from Nanyuki taxi operators. However, those records were not available. Investigators also visited Kirimara Springs Hotel. They wanted to review CCTV footage from the day Joyce disappeared, but they were informed that the recordings had already been overwritten. The hotel manager, however, confirmed that Mugure and Joyce had been together at the hotel. As detectives continued gathering information, they became increasingly focused on Laikipia Airbase. The military facility was heavily secured. Investigators wanted to understand how 3 people could disappear after entering the base. During the investigation, police sought permission from the Laikipia Airbase Command to search Major Mugure's residence. However, when detectives informed him about the intended search, Mugure told them he was away in Nairobi at the Department of Defense headquarters on official duties. He requested that Collins Pamba, a casual worker at the airbase, assist detectives in accessing his residence. According to investigators, the door to house number A3 was locked. Pamba entered the house through a rear window and opened the door from inside. Detectives searched the residence. Initially, they did not immediately recover evidence linking the house to Joyce and her children. But as investigators prepared to leave the residential area, they questioned security guards stationed at the airbase. The guards provided important information. They confirmed that Mugure had entered the residential area with Joyce and the children. Investigators also examined visitors' records at the military base. The records showed that Joyce had signed into the residential area using her identification details when she arrived. However, detectives noticed something unusual. The handwriting on the exit record did not appear to belong to Joyce. They suspected that another person may have signed out on her behalf. This discovery raised more questions. If Joyce had not left the base herself, then what had happened inside Laikipia Airbase? As investigators continued gathering evidence, they examined Major Mugure's phone and other documents. On November 15, 2019, detectives contacted Mugure for further questioning. At the time, he was at Nanyuki police station following up on the missing persons report. Investigators requested his phone as part of the investigation. According to testimony later presented in court, Mugure asked for the phone and deleted messages before resetting the device to factory settings. After questioning him, detectives arrested him. The arrest marked a major turning point in the case, but investigators still needed to find Joyce and the children. They needed answers, and they needed evidence. The following day, November 16, 2019, detectives continued their search. According to investigators, that was the breakthrough day. They were tipped off and eventually led them to a location in Makaburini, Thingithu, Nanyuki. There, hidden beneath the ground, was a shallow grave. Inside were the remains of Joyce Syombua and her 2 children. The family that had disappeared nearly 3 weeks earlier had been found. But the discovery brought devastating confirmation. Joyce, Shanice, and Prince were dead. Their bodies had been placed inside gunny bags and buried together. The remains were partially decomposed. The search for a missing mother and her children had become a murder investigation. The bodies were taken to Nanyuki Teaching and Referral Hospital mortuary for examination. The post-mortem was conducted by Chief Government Pathologist Dr. Johansen Oduor. The examination was witnessed by forensic experts, detectives, and lawyers. Because of the condition of the bodies, determining the exact time of death was difficult. Dr. Oduor explained that decomposition had affected the ability to establish precisely when the killings occurred. He also stated that the identities of the bodies would remain presumptive until DNA testing was completed. According to the post-mortem findings, Joyce Syombua died from multiple injuries on the head. Her daughter Shanice Maua and son Prince Michael died after being strangled with a rope. The findings confirmed that the deaths were not accidental. They were the result of violence.
female and 2 children, 1 male, 1 female. So the other female had injuries in the head. I think had been beaten on the head and had some blunt injuries on the head with bleeding in the brain. The male child had been strangled using a rope. The female child also had been strangled using a rope.
For Joyce's family, the moment they had feared had arrived. Her mother, Maua Malombe, was taken to the mortuary to identify the bodies. She positively identified them as those of her daughter and grandchildren. However, investigators still needed scientific confirmation. DNA analysis was conducted by the government chemist. The results later confirmed that the remains recovered from the shallow grave belonged to Joyce Syombua, Shanice Maua, and Prince Michael. Because of security concerns raised by the family, detectives from the DCI Homicide Unit escorted relatives to the mortuary. Several undercover officers were deployed around the facility. After identifying the bodies, Joyce's mother and 2 other relatives sat quietly under a tree as they waited for the post-mortem examination to be completed. For about 4 hours, they waited in silence. When the forensic team completed the examination, they privately briefed Maua Malombe for approximately 20 minutes. She remained calm before leaving the hospital in a police vehicle. The discovery of Joyce Syombua and her children transformed the case from a missing persons investigation into one of Kenya's most closely followed murder cases. The allegations were shocking. A mother and 2 children had disappeared after visiting their father. The bodies were later found hidden in a shallow grave. A military officer had become the main suspect. The investigation would now focus on how the killings were carried out, who was involved, and whether others helped conceal the crime. Detectives began examining every detail, every movement, every phone call, every person connected to the events of October 26, 2019. And among those people was a young casual worker at Laikipia Airbase named Collins Pamba. His account would later become one of the most important parts of the prosecution's case.
Nyesha venye tulipanga mili hapa kwa gari katoshana aje. Sinu hivyo ndo ungeuliza. Mimi iliingia tukakunja mili namna hiyo. Wewe unataka kuniambia ati nikompea alikuwa anatoshana aje. Hiyo ni maswali gani niuliza?